Will the rapture happen in 2024? Well, there's new evidence making a strong case for that, and here we are already halfway through the year. In this multi-part series, we're going to go over dates, timelines, calendars, signs in the heavens. You name it, we're going to cover it. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell because you won't want to miss any of these videos. This is the first part one of a multi-part series. Also, please subscribe to us over at 100% Bible. And if you could give me a thumbs up in the chat just to let me know you can hear me, that would be awesome. But man, we are excited to talk about this today. Also, I just want to remind you that we're doing a new video series sharing your experiences. So send us your pics, your vids, your thoughts. If you don't have a picture or video, maybe draw a sketch or something to go with your story or your experience or dream, vision, sign, anomaly, insight, whatever God has been showing you. And we want to put out some compilation videos of that as well. And we need your support. We are a ministry. In addition to this channel, we also have 100% Bible. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. Please help us do that. And we also have our ministry at MikhailMinistries.com. So we hope that you'll support us there as well. And just in reference to this video and this video series, we did a couple other videos that you may want to check out about a possible end times timeline. Did that earlier this year. Then a year or two ago, I did this video about the prophecy at the wall and Suleiman. We're going to talk a little bit about that in this series as well, so you might want to check that out. Also, just put the word timeline in this channel. You'll find lots of timeline videos, some of which include a similar timeline to the one I'm going to share with you today, but it's a little bit different than what we've talked about in the past. And we're looking at promised land to promised land here. And we've talked about this in the past, but with a little bit different date and a little bit different events tied to those dates. And so I'm really excited to share all of this with you today. Again, if you can just give me a thumbs up, we are live always here at Mikhail Messenger. So I always like to make sure that you can hear me out there. That's very important, of course. So promised land to promised land, what does this mean? Well, here's the deal, guys. God is a God of numbers, and he is a God of order and planning. And from the very beginning, when he created the heavens and the stars and the earth and everything in it, he did it in 7 days. Famously, in 7 days. The Bible opens up with this fact. From Genesis chapter 1, it talks about in the very first day, and then goes on up to the seventh day. And on the seventh day, God rested from all the work he had done on the previous 6 days. So the number 7 is very, very significant to God, and it doesn't just apply to the days, but it applies to throughout the Bible. But God really wanted to hit home this connection with 7 and the connection with how we should be counting time. And that being the case, we may have something to be very excited about this year in 2024, the way things are lining up with God's numbers here. So in Genesis 2, God talks about the seventh day. Obviously, he rested. We all are familiar with that. And many times he talks about 7 days to get on the ark for Noah, 7 days when it came to not being able to eat leavened bread during the Exodus from Egypt. So there's a lot of 7 day connections. But then God took it to the next level when he said, count 7 weeks for yourself. So in other words, 7 sevens. So this 7 thing is very important with God. And that's when you begin counting for the Feast of Shavuot, or Pentecost, as it's also known. So 7 weeks, 7 times 7, is a very significant time to the Lord. And then the next 7 was for years, 7 times 7 years. So he says, count off 7 Sabbaths. Sabbath is also a term used for weeks in the Bible. So 7 weeks of years. So 7 Sabbaths of years. So 7 times 7 years. So then instead of 49 days like you get with Pentecost, you get 49 years. So that's what we get there. And you have the 50th year as the Jubilee. So that's the time of celebration. And then finally you have 70 times 7. So then you get the prophecy in Daniel of 70 weeks, or often seen as years again, and units of 7. So 70 weeks. So 70 weeks, and then, so you've got 70 and you've got weeks, which is a 7, a week is 7. So 70 times 7 there. So very, very interesting. So when you put it all together, you've got 7 days of creation. So you have this time of 6 days and then a time of rest. And then you have 7 weeks times 7, and that's 49 days. And then you have 7 years times 7, and that's 49 years. And then you have 70 weeks or 70 years times 7, that's 490 years. So it brings new meaning to what Jesus said in Matthew 18 when Peter asked him, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? And Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. So both Peter and Jesus were familiar with the scriptures, obviously, and they're familiar with 70 times 7. So it's kind of almost like a wink-wink statement he's making there, but it also has a deeper meaning to it because he's talking about forgiveness. And there's a time that God is going to be forgiving to us, a time of grace. And then there comes a time when that's over, and God will no longer forgive the sins, and you're either with God and you go to heaven, or you're not with God and you go to hell. So that's kind of what we're coming up to now, the kind of ending of this 70 times 7 time that God's talking about. So 70 times 7 obviously is the 490 that we see here, right? 70 times 7. We see that in Daniel as well. And that's what we see on this chart that we have here that we're looking at, is these are periods of 70 times 7, 7 times. So in other words, it's 7 periods of 70 times 7. So 490 plus 490 plus 490 plus 490, etc. So what does that mean? Well, when you take 490 times 7, you get 3,430. And why is that significant? Well, because when you take 3,430 and you add it to, well, let me back it up here. Where are you? When you take 3,430, I think that this is the one I'm looking for. And you take it from the time that they enter the promised land, it actually lands on this year, 2024. So that's pretty significant. So let's take a look at this a little bit. So basically, when we first talked about this last time, we were looking at the promised land entering of 1401, and that was a potential date that was put out there before. It's some of the past videos. You can check that out. And there were some interesting connections date-wise there as well. Well, the Lord led me to kind of go back through this timeline and kind of reconfigure for our current status of where we are in the world right now. And along with some other videos, which I appreciate some people sent me in our ministry, that kind of sparked me to kind of want to get back into this a little bit again, and with some new insights. I mean, I just spent the last couple days studying this, researching this, and this is a pretty amazing finds. So this series is going to be pretty exciting, and this is just sort of the introduction to the series, and then tomorrow we'll do the next part. But yeah, pretty exciting stuff. Thank you for the thumbs up. I see those thumbs there. So basically, Joshua entered and the Israelites, they entered the promised land crossing the Jordan, and they set their feet at the Jordan with the ark, and the Jordan parted just like the Red Sea. And they finally entered the promised land. That's finally when they get to go in the promised land. As you remember, Moses didn't get to enter the promised land. He got to see the promised land, but that was it. And Joshua was the one that led them in. So they finally get into the promised land. And we know that we're waiting for the promised land too, right? We're waiting to go and be with our Lord. That is the promised land. Wherever he is, that's the promised land. So whether it's in heaven or in the new millennium or what have you, we're looking forward to that promised land, the New Jerusalem, etc. So basically, that took place, arguably, in 1406. And why is that important? Well, we're going to take a look here. So check this out. I want to share a couple references for that. It says, in the book of Genesis, God promised to give the land of Canaan to Abraham's descendants. However, these descendants, the people of Israel, were enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. God brought Israel out of Egypt through the leadership of Moses around 1446 BC, but it would not be for another 40 years until Israel entered the promised land around 1406. Okay, now this one says, and that date of 967 BC is critical in this discussion. 1 Kings 6:1 reads, and it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. From here, it is simple math. 480 years earlier than 967 BCE brings us to an Exodus date of circa 1447 to 1446 BCE. Or BC, as we know. Subtract the 40 years of sojourn in the wilderness, i.e. Joshua 5:6, and that brings us to an entry into Canaan around 1407 to 1406. BC. Now, you work backwards in BC. It always confuses me a little bit, so I just want to remind you of that. So let's read one other one here. It says here is the scholars have debated, right, what date they entered. Did they enter the Jordan 1406, 1260, or 1451, the first year of Jubilee, to me immediately after? Well, here is an elucidation on the method of the calculation of the date 1406 BC. We know this date, 1406, from a key chronological marker recorded in the Book of Kings, which is what we just looked at, but I want to read it to you again. The year Solomon began to build the temple is given both in terms of the exodus from Egypt as well as the year of Solomon's reign. 1 Kings 6:1, and it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. It was established in Thiel's mysterious numbers of the Hebrew kings that the 4th year of Solomon corresponds to 966 BC. Therefore, the date of the Exodus must be 480 years prior to 966 BC or 1446 BC, since the crossing of the Jordan took place 40 years or later. That dates it to 1406 BC. Now, for some of you, you might be like, why is this so important, Mikhail? Give me a break already. Well, if you take 1406 and you put it in the handy-dandy BC to AD calculator, you get 3,430 years, landing in 2024, which is this year. Now, of course, if you put it in a different calculator and you account for the extra year of, zero and so forth, it comes to 3429. However, you got to realize that this year, we will go into the new year come the fall, because the Hebrew calendar starts on the 7th month. So depending on how you want to calculate that, one way or the other. Also, you got to consider that last year as being a Jubilee year, which naturally it makes sense that God would set us free and take us in the year of Jubilee, as Scripture also indicates, which also could point to this fall of that new year beginning. So let's take all this in for a second. So we've got 1406, Joshua enters the promised land. Well, again, if God has been counting in sevens ever since Genesis, right? And every 7 years and every 70 times 7, this is very significant to God. There's a reason he set this up. There's a reason he started the whole Bible this way, that it's something we have to consider, this 7 times 7 times 7, or 7 times 70 of 3,430 years. And if that's the case, if Joshua and the Israelites enter the promised land in 1406, that means we can evenly count to this year, 490 years, every 490 years, we land in 2024. Now, what's interesting about that is, again, God has this 6 and 7 thing going on, right? 6 years for work and 7 is rest. So if we've made it to 7 at 490, that would make sense that it's time for rest. Of course, we've got 8 also connecting to Jesus and eternity. So that's kind of an interesting thought there, that this may be the moment that we've been waiting for. Okay, so something to consider. So I want to share one more with you here, and then I'm going to wrap this video up, and we'll reconvene in part 2. So basically, what happened here is you had 1406. And that's 3,430 years. And then you get to 916, right? And that is when the kingdom was revived. The kingdom basically had fallen apart after David and Solomon's reign under his son Rehoboam. And this is when it begins to be restored in 916 BC. And that's 490 years later. That's in the reign of Asa. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, unlike the other people before him. He banished the perverted persons from the land, removed all the idols his fathers had made. He removed Maacah, his grandmother, from being queen mother, and the obscene image that she made, and so forth. So he restored things. Although he wasn't perfect, he didn't get rid of the high places, but he was starting to revive things there in 916. Also, what's interesting about 916 is it seems to be the time that the prophet Samuel died, and at least according to this account. And if that's the case, that too is very intriguing, because one of the big things was that people had rejected Samuel and they wanted a king, and that was the start of Samuel's sort of time in the Bible of anointing Saul and so forth. And God said, "Don't worry about what they're saying. They haven't rejected you; they've rejected me as their king." And so it's interesting that Samuel's reign comes to an end in 916 BC as well. So I'm going to wrap it up there for now, but I want to get your thoughts on this so far, and we're going to come back tomorrow with part 2 as we continue this journey. We're going to go through this timeline, and we're going to also look at things in the heavens, the calendar, and so forth. But be sure to hit the button you see on your screen here for the next installment of this series as we explore, will we be raptured this year in 2024? God bless you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.